Texas Panhandle, 1872. The wind carried dust across the wide, empty plains as Kade Fletcher pulled his horse to a stop outside the old stagecoach, stop he had been fixing up into a proper homestead. He had not expected company that evening, but there she was standing there like a storm waiting to break, her dark dress torn, her face streaked with dirt, and a rifle slung over one shoulder like she was ready to fight the whole world. "You Fletcher?" she asked. Kade tipped his hat, cautious. "I am, you lost." "No," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Name's Mara Bishop, I need a place for the night." He did not move. "You the same Mara Bishop who shot a man in Amarillo last spring?" "Depends," she said. "Did he deserve it?" Kade looked her over. She was tall, not soft, her eyes scanning the horizon like she was always waiting for someone to come after her. Folks talked about her in town, and not kindly. Said she was cursed, said she was dangerous. Said her husband died under strange circumstances and that wherever she went, trouble followed. "I do not take in trouble," Kade said evenly. Mara looked down at his boots, then back up into his eyes. "I do not make trouble unless I have to." Behind her, a small movement caught his eye. A boy, maybe 6 years old, stepped out from behind a fallen fence post, holding the hand of a girl who could not have been more than 4. Both with dust on their cheeks, both quiet as shadows. "My children," Mara said, voice low. "Cashin and Clara." Kade's jaw tightened. He had not expected that. "Where's their father?" "Dead 3 years now. Shot protecting a wagon from Comancheros. We were headed west. I stayed. The others did not." Kade glanced at the children. The boy met his eyes, unblinking. The girl clung to her mother's skirts. "You got food?" Mara asked. Kade nodded once. "Stable's empty. You can bunk in the loft tonight." Mara gave a short nod and led the children around the side of the barn. Kade stood there a long moment before following. That night the wind howled. The fire popped low in the hearth as Kade sat at the table, boots off, rubbing his sore shoulder from hauling lumber all morning. Across from him, Mara sat silent, sipping coffee. The children slept in the corner, curled up on a pile of quilts. "You do not talk much," she said. Kade looked at her. "Neither do you." She smiled just barely. "Talking gets most people in trouble. I find it better to act." He studied her face. There were lines there, more than a woman of 27 should carry, but there was something steady in her too, something unflinching. "I heard what folks say about you," he said. "I reckon you have. You do not look dangerous. Looks can lie." Her eyes flicked to the rifle resting against the wall. "But I am done running for now." Kade leaned back in his chair. "You planning on staying?" "I will be gone by morning." "You sure about that?" Mara looked at him for a long time. "No," she admitted. The next morning she made cornbread without asking. The children fed the chickens like they had always belonged there. Kade watched from the porch, arms crossed, unsure what to make of the ache in his chest when he saw Clara laugh chasing a hen, or the way Cashin squinted up at him with curiosity but no fear. After breakfast, Mara handed him a tin of coffee. "We can be gone by noon." "You do not have to," Kade said. She looked at him. "Why would you want us here?" "Because it is quiet here," he said simply, "and you seem to know how to keep it that way." She gave a short laugh. "That is the first kind thing anyone has said to me in years." Cashin ran up, tugging her hand. "Mama, can we stay? Just one night more?" Mara hesitated, then looked at Kade. He nodded. "You can stay as long as you work." "Work I can do," she said. "But I do not come free." "Neither do I." Days passed. Then a week. Kade found himself waiting for Mara's voice in the kitchen, for Clara's laugh, for Cashin's quiet questions about the land and the horses. Mara helped mend the fences. She could shoot cleaner than most men he knew, and she fixed a busted axle on the wagon without needing help. One night, just before sundown, Kade saw her standing alone by the paddock, arms folded. He walked up beside her. "You always this still when the sun sets?" he asked. "Used to be," she said. "Then I stopped watching, got tired of what came after dark." Kade looked at her. "You ever think about starting over?" She turned her head slowly. "You offering?" "I might be." Mara's eyes searched his. "You do not know me, Kade. I know enough," he said. I know you protect what is yours, I know you do not scare easy, and I know you make this place feel like more than just a pile of wood and dirt." Mara looked away, jaw clenched. "You are not cursed," he added. She blinked at that. "You sure?" "Yeah," he said. "I am sure." That night, he found her on the porch after the children had gone to bed. She sat with a blanket over her legs, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. He sat beside her. "I was not supposed to survive," she said quietly. "When my husband died, the others told me to turn back. Said I would not last. But I could not leave the children. I thought if I just kept moving, maybe someday we would find a place." Kade looked at her. "You found one," she nodded slowly. "Maybe I did." The silence stretched between them, soft and full. "Mara," he said, his voice low. "You do not have to leave, not ever." She turned to him, her eyes full of something raw and uncertain. "You sure you want me here?" He reached out and gently took her hand. "I am sure." And for the first time since she arrived, she let herself lean into him just a little. It was not much. But it was a beginning. Kade shifted the harness over the draft mare's back, tightening the cinch with steady hands as the sun pushed over the horizon. The light came in soft, like it knew not to disturb too much at once. Inside the barn, Mara was already stacking kindling, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Clara sat on a feed sack, humming tunelessly while Cashin dug through a tin of bent nails looking for straight ones. "Careful with those," Kade said to the boy. Cashin glanced up. "I know which ones'll bite." Kade gave him a nod. The boy had a quiet sort of competence about him, the kind that came from learning too early how to get by without asking for help. Kade recognized it because he'd worn the same expression when he was that size. Mara straightened, brushing straw from her skirt. "He's not wrong. First time he tried to hitch the mule in Wichita Falls, he came back with a bloodied thumb and a grin full of pride." Kade lifted the bridle from its hook. "That where you were before?" "Briefly," she said. "Didn't stay." He waited, but she didn't offer more, and he didn't press. They had a rhythm now, spoken things and unspoken ones, quiet understanding where questions might unsettle what little peace they were building. Later, after the chores were done and the children were down for midday rest, Mara came to the porch carrying a tin box. "I found this in the bottom of the trunk," she said, setting it between them. "Thought it was lost after the crossing." He lifted the lid. Inside were folded scraps of paper, worn thin with age, a child's drawing, a strip of lace, a small tin type, faded and scratched, two figures standing stiff beside a wagon, wind-blown and unsmiling. "My sister and me," Mara said, sitting beside him. "She died in the cholera wave that hit Fort Belknap. I kept this to remember her face." Kade studied the photo, then handed it back with care. "She looks like you," Mara nodded, fingers tracing the edge of the tin type. She was quieter. "I did the talking for both of us. You don't talk much now. I ran out of people to talk for." A crow called from the oak tree by the barn. The sound was sharp, but the moment stayed still. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "What? Being known like that," she considered. "Not the way it ended. But sometimes I miss someone knowing what I meant before I said it." Kade leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You think you'd ever want that again?" Mara didn't answer right away. "I might," she said, "but it'd have to be earned." He turned his head toward her, voice low. "I'm not in a hurry." She looked at him then, really looked. "That's the first good reason I've heard to stay." That evening, Clara woke coughing, not harsh but high and tight in her chest. Mara wrapped her in a shawl and paced the room, humming a tune Kade didn't recognize. "Could be the dust," he said, watching her from the doorway. "I know," she said, "but it starts like this, always does. Cold catches her easy." "What do you need?" She hesitated, then said, "Elder bark, if you have it, wild mint, I'll steep it strong." Kade nodded and stepped into the night. He came back with both, crushed and ready, before the fire burned low. Mara brewed the tea, blowing gently across the rim before coaxing Clara to drink. The girl settled slow, her breath evening out against her mother's shoulder. "You're good with them," Kade said. She didn't look up. "I've had no choice. I think you'd still be good with them if you did." She smiled faintly, not looking away from her daughter. "That's the second." He poured a fresh cup of water into her basin and set it beside her without a word. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance, but the cabin held its warmth. In the morning, Clara's fever broke. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, brushing damp curls from the girl's forehead while Cashin read aloud from a battered primer they'd found in the back room. Kade watched from the doorway, arms crossed. Mara looked up once and held his gaze. There was a quiet in her expression now, not absence, but something settled. That afternoon, she came to him while he was repairing the gate. "I've been thinking," she said. He waited. "You said I didn't have to leave. I'm not planning to," he nodded once. "Was hoping you'd say that." "There's something else," she said. "I can't sleep with them both in the loft. If I'm staying, I want to build a room off the back. Just one more wall and a roofline." Kade set down the hammer. "I'll draw it out. Start tomorrow." Mara looked out across the pasture. "It's strange," she said. "I've spent years waiting for the next fire. Now I'm thinking in seasons." Kade stepped closer. "You won't have to outrun anything here." She tilted her head but didn't look away. "We'll see, won't we?" He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of what's behind you," he said. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. "You should be." "I'm not," he said, and she believed him. Spring settled slow across the plains, green pushing up through last year's dead grass like it had nowhere else to go. Kade kept to his routine mending tack, checking water lines, training the new filly, but the rhythm of the place had shifted in quiet ways. Mara moved through the days like she belonged to the land, not just sheltering in it. She'd stopped glancing west every evening. She started planting things. They kept a respectful distance most days, speaking in practical terms how to brace the new beam in the lean-to. What to do about the rust creeping along the plowshare, but that distance was narrowing in ways neither of them named out loud. One morning, Mara found him standing over the orchard saplings he'd planted the previous year. She crouched beside the smallest one, thumb brushing over a split at the base. "Root rot," she said. "Too much water pooled here." He looked down. "Didn't think to bed it right when I said it. You lose two more like this, you might not get fruit for 5 years. I suppose you know better." She stood, brushing off her skirt. "I know what not to do, at least." He gave a low laugh. "You ever tend trees back where you came from?" "No," she said. "But I kept a pomegranate alive in a wash basin for 2 years in New Mexico territory. That should count for something." He tilted his head. "You miss the desert?" "I miss the way the air stays dry and honest. Everything out here feels heavier." "You ever wish you'd stayed?" Her gaze slid toward the hills. "Not since Clara stopped crying in her sleep." Kade nodded. He didn't ask more. That afternoon, a wagon came rattling down the road from the north. Kade recognized the Allen brothers before they cleared the rise, two hard men with a reputation for collecting debts no one claimed to owe. He stepped off the porch before they stopped, rifle resting easy against his shoulder. "Just passing through," Jeb Allen said, reins slack in his hand. "Then keep passing," Kade answered. Levy Allen leaned forward, squinting toward the barn. "Heard talk you've got company these days." Kade didn't shift. "That concern you?" "Not unless it's the kind of company that owes folks." Mara stepped out then, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Jeb's mouth curled. "Well, look at that. Thought you were dead, Bishop. You were wrong," she said. "No surprise there," Levy said. "You always were good at disappearing." Kade's voice stayed even. "You've said what you came to say." "Maybe," Jeb said, flicking the reins. "Maybe not." They rolled on, dust kicking up behind them. Mara didn't move until they were out of sight. "You know them?" Kade asked. "Only their kind," she said. "They followed a trail once. Didn't like where it ended." He looked at her. "They coming back?" "They're the type that don't like being wrong, so yes," he nodded. "Then we'll be ready." That night, Kade brought out the revolver he kept wrapped in oilcloth and laid it on the table. Mara said nothing, just cleaned it with a cloth while the fire burned low. "You ever think about marrying again?" he asked, eyes on the flames. She didn't look up. "Sometimes. But I want something different this time." "What kind of different?" "Someone who listens more than he talks. Someone who doesn't make promises with nothing behind them." Someone who knows what it costs to stay. He nodded slowly. You'd have that here. She set the revolver down and met his eyes. We're not there yet, I know, he said, but we're somewhere, she added. He leaned back in his chair. Yeah. We are. Outside, the wind pressed against the shutters, but inside the quiet held. Cashin stirred once in the loft above and then settled again. Clara let out a soft sigh in her sleep. In the morning, Mara asked for nails and a saw. She built a fence line along the east side of the pasture, measuring with care, her lines clean and true. Kade watched her work, not offering help unless she asked. That evening, he brought her a small box wrapped in a blue kerchief. She opened it by the fire. Inside was a ribbon worn but clean, dyed the color of prairie sky after rain. I saw it in town a while back, he said. Figured you might like it. She ran her thumb over the edge. I haven't worn one since Clara was born. No harm in starting again. When she tied it back in her hair, she didn't say anything, but she didn't take it off. They sat that way until the light faded completely, and the only thing between them was time. Mara stepped out barefoot before first light, apron tied over her nightgown, holding a tin bowl of cornmeal soaked in buttermilk. The chickens stirred as she approached, and behind her the door creaked as Cashin padded out, hair mussed from sleep. Go back in, it's cold, she said without turning. He stood on the porch a moment longer. I'll gather eggs. She didn't argue. He was nearly 7 and stubborn like his father had been, but steadier in his silence. She handed him the rag-lined basket and watched him move through the coop with quiet care. Later, Kade saw her kneeling beside the woodpile, splitting kindling with a narrow-bladed hatchet. She worked with practiced rhythm, her sleeves damp from scrubbing the washbasin and her hair pulled back with the same ribbon he'd given her. He didn't speak until she paused to wipe her brow. You mind if I ride out to the creek today? He asked. Cattle have been watering low, might be a blockage. She stood and dusted her hands. Take Cashin, he's old enough to learn water lines. He's still small. He can ride. He's your shadow already. Kade turned toward the barn without answering, but the corner of his mouth gave him away. Cashin had been trailing him through the days, watching how he checked hooves, how he moved through gates, how he rubbed saddle soap into cracked leather. Kade hadn't asked for it, but he didn't mind. By mid-morning they were halfway to the creek, the boy astride the dun pony, reins loose in his hands. They spoke little, but Kade pointed out where the cottonwoods thinned and where the water dipped under shale. Cashin listened, nodding once, then again when shown how to read the current's shift. When they found the blockage, a tangle of driftwood and silt pressed against a fallen limb, Kade handed the boy a hooked branch. Start clearing from the top. Work with the flow, not against it. Cashin worked slow but careful. After a while, Kade joined him, and the water broke through in a rush, cold and clean. Back at the homestead, Mara was kneeling in the garden plot, coaxing seed rows into the loam. Clara sat beside her with a dull spoon, tracing shapes in the dirt. When Kade and Cashin returned, the girl bounded toward them, arms outstretched. Papa, she called. Kade froze. Mara stood slowly, brushing her palms clean. Cashin dismounted without a word and led the pony to the trough. Mara approached, her eyes unreadable. She's never called anyone that. He crouched to lift Clara. She didn't mean she did, Mara said. She doesn't say things she doesn't mean. Kade looked at her, the child warm against his chest. You all right with it? I wouldn't stop her if I wasn't. Her voice wasn't soft, but it had no edge either. Later, when the children were asleep, Mara sat on the floor near the hearth, sewing a patch over the knee of Cashin's trousers. Kade sat nearby, repairing a broken stirrup strap. You ever lose someone close? She asked. He set the strap down. You don't ask easy things. I don't know how to ask easy things. He leaned back against the wall. My brother died in the war, younger by 2 years, rode with Hood's men. Didn't come home, I'm sorry. I was angry for a long time, not just at the war, at him for going. She looked at her stitching. Hard to forgive the dead. I never did, but I stopped carrying it like a knife, she nodded. My first was stillborn, between Cashin and Clara. I don't talk about it, you just did. She set the trousers aside. I don't like silence just for silence's sake, but this place, it doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. He leaned forward. That's because it is. She didn't move away when he reached for her hand. Her fingers were calloused, warm. She laced them through his without hesitation. Outside, wind moved through the grass. The fire crackled low, and the quiet between them settled into something whole. The morning sun rose behind a veil of low-lying mist, softening the lines of the pasture and silvering the tops of the fence rails. Mara stood at the stove, hair still damp from the basin, stirring corn mush with a wooden spoon that had worn thin at the center. The children were still dozing, their breathing slow, and even from the corner bed tucked against the wall, Kade was tightening the hinges on the barn door when she stepped out, a folded scrap of paper in her hand. "This came with the supply wagon yesterday," she said, holding it out. He wiped his hands on his trousers before taking it. The handwriting was rough, slanted, unfamiliar. "Marshall out of Mobetty," she said. "He's chasing down the Allen brothers, said they've been seen crossing into Kansas territory." He read the note through once, then again slower. "Didn't think he'd bother sending word. He said they were wanted for lifting stock outside Dodge. One of the cowhands recognized your brand." Kade folded the paper and tucked it into his vest pocket. "They won't be back." Mara didn't answer. She stared out toward the horizon, the cuff of her sleeve brushing against his arm. "You ever think about what it means to stay still?" she asked after a long pause. He glanced at her. "I think it means putting roots down deep enough they don't pull loose easy." She nodded once, slowly. "I've been thinking about the schoolhouse again." He leaned against the post. "The one they tried to start up in Tascosa, it folded before it opened. But the lumber's still sound. If we hauled it here, I could make something of it. You want to teach? I want Clara to read before she's 10. I want Cashin to know more than how to fix a fence. And I want the children out here to have a place their mothers can trust." He studied her face. "You'd need help?" "I'd need a roof, a firebox, and someone who can count straight enough to keep the books." He smiled. "I can count. Then you're hired." That spring they built it, board by board set on the flat stretch just beyond the cottonwoods. Cashin helped dig the foundation trench, his shoulders sunburned and proud. Clara carried water in a tin pail, always careful not to spill. When the building stood complete, a single-room frame with shuttered windows, a flagstone step, and a stove, Kade had traded a broken saddle for Mara, placed a slate on the wall and opened the door wide. The children came. First the McLeary boys from the sheep ranch west of the rise, then 2 girls from the half-Mexican family near the creek. They sat in straight-back chairs Kade had carved from scrap, chins lifted, eyes wide. Mara taught them with a steady voice, her hands never idle. During lessons, Clara sat at her feet, watching the chalk move across the board as if it were magic. That summer, Kade built a porch off the cabin's west side, where the sun fell long and golden in the evenings. Mara joined him there most nights, a tin cup in her hands, her skirt brushing his knee. Once, she laid her head on his shoulder and didn't move for a long time. He didn't speak, just rested his cheek against her hair and let the stillness hold them. One afternoon, as the wind shifted warm out of the south, Cashin ran up from the creek with a fish still wriggling on the line. Mara took it with a laugh, and for the first time, Kade saw her eyes crinkle at the corners like she'd forgotten how to hold back. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, she stepped out to where he was oiling the hinges on the barn door. "I thought about you," she said. He set the cloth down. "When, last year, when we were crossing the Caprock, I didn't know your name yet, but I imagined someone like you was out here. Quiet, steady, not easy, but kind." He wiped his hands. "I never imagined you. But I think I waited for you just the same." She stepped closer, hands folded. "I'm not asking for anything more than what we already have, but if you were to ask me to stay forever, I wouldn't say no." He reached for her face, slow and sure, thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. "Then stay, Mara. As long as the land holds us." She leaned into his touch, her voice hushed. "I will." They married under the cottonwoods just before the leaves turned. No preacher, just the two of them and the children, with Cashin holding a Bible and Clara scattering dried sage over the step. Kade gave her a simple silver ring he'd traded for in town, a little worn but strong. That winter, the cabin stayed warm. The schoolhouse held 10 children by season's end. Mara taught by lamplight, and Kade carved wooden letters for Clara to trace with her fingers. The land didn't grow easier, but it grew familiar. And the silence between them was no longer something to brace against. It was something they chose. They slept close, and when Mara woke in the dark to the old fears pressing in, Kade's hand was always there, firm and gentle against her back. In the spring, the orchard bloomed. The surviving trees bore their first pale blossoms, and Mara stood beneath them with Clara on her hip, watching the petals fall like snow. Kade walked up behind her, resting a hand on her waist. "You still think about leaving?" he asked. "No," she said. "Not once." And she never did. They built a life that held. Years later, when the fence lines aged and the children had grown taller than the doorframe, the schoolhouse still stood, and the orchard bore fruit enough for pies and trade. Mara's hair grayed at the temples, Kade's beard flecked with silver, but their hands found each other without thinking every time. They had no need for promises after that. What they'd made was already kept.